was during a dull, dark, and soundless day in the autumn of that year, when the clouds hung oppressively low in the heavens. I had taken a coach into a singularly dreary part of the country. As evening approached, I found myself within view of the melancholy house of Usher. It's difficult to describe, but the moment I saw it, I had a pervading sense of gloom overwhelm me. There it was, a 3-storied mansion set within a simple landscape, windows that appeared to be staring like vacant eyes set into the blank walls, surrounded by brown dead hedges and white trunks of decayed trees. There was a cold feeling to it all, a sinking, sickening of the soul. Dreary, that's what it was. Perhaps if the trees had been more healthy, if the windows were lit and inviting, I might have had a completely different feeling about the place. As it was, even the coach driver couldn't wait to drive off from that mansion of gloom. I was there because I had been invited by its owner, Roderick Usher, to visit for a few weeks. I had known Usher since childhood, but that was a long while back. A week before, he had sent a letter to me, written in a nervous hand, speaking of acute bodily illness, as well as a mental disorder and a need to see me. He called me his only personal friend. He thought that my visit might help cheer him up. How could I deny him? His consideration of me as a personal friend was rather odd, since I hadn't seen him in 10 years or so, and we were never close. He came from an old and revered family. He held himself above the rest of us at school, reserved and aloof. In fact, his family had always been referred to as the House of Usher, which had also included the home itself. That building that reeked of mystery and ancient horror, set in an atmosphere of psychological depression and desperation. Perhaps that's a bit of an exaggeration on my part. I had to shake myself free of that perception. I mean, it's only a building, after all. True, it was covered in vines and fungi, spread like a tangled web over all 4 sides. It was, without a doubt, dilapidated, but I saw no fallen masonry, yet some of it appeared to be crumbling. I was sure the woodwork had to be rotten. The widespread decay might have made the building unstable, and extending from the roof in front down the wall in a zigzag fashion to the high weeds ran a large crack. Waiting at the front door was a servant who took my horse, and I entered through a Gothic archway into the hall. A valet led me through many dark and intricate passages to the studio of the master, past carvings on the ceiling, past somber tapestries on the walls and the armor and trophies. At a staircase, the family physician was waiting. He didn't have much to say, so I continued to follow the valet, and we finally arrived at a door. Now, the room in which I found myself was very large and lofty. The windows were long and narrow, and the black oak floor must have once gleamed like a mirror. The reddish light poured in through the stained glass window at the farthest end of the room. Dark draperies hung upon the walls. The furniture was antique and tattered and looked quite uncomfortable. There were many books and musical instruments lying about, but they didn't make the room come alive. No, I breathed an atmosphere of sorrow there, more gloom hanging over and pervading the house of Usher.
Victor, how are you, my friend?
Roderick, glad to see you.
You're looking well. How was your trip?
Fine.
Come in, sit down. We have so much to talk about.
Actually, I was shocked to see the man. I gazed upon him with a feeling half of pity, half of awe. Surely no man's appearance had changed so much in so brief a period of time as had Roderick Usher. It is hard to believe that this pale, thin character before me was my childhood friend. His hair was white. He looked like a cadaver. As for his mood, it fluctuated from nervous agitation, sometimes sullen, sometimes vivacious. And the way he spoke in that abrupt, unhurried, perfectly modulated enunciation, well, one might have thought he was a drunkard or an opium eater trying to hide his addiction.
I suppose you're wondering why I asked you here after so long a time. Victor, I needed to see you. I know you might be able to help me. The problem may mystify you at first. It has to do with my family, an evil in my family. I need to find a remedy for it. I have inherited a morbid acuteness of the senses. For instance, I can only eat bland food or wear garments of a certain texture. I can't bear the odor of flowers, and the faintest light hurts my eyes. As for music, I can't endure anything but the sound of stringed instruments. Anything else inspires horror within me. I know I'll die from this affliction. I don't fear dying. I dread the events leading up to dying. And I fear this house where I am chained. Yes, for 2 decades I have not left it. It owns me. It possesses my body and soul. But that's not the only reason for my sickness, you see. I did have a companion all these years. My beloved sister, Madeline. I called her Lady Madeline. But after a severe illness, my last and only relative on this earth is gone. I am now the last of the Ushers.
Now, at that moment, a woman I took to be the Lady Madeline passed slowly by the room out in the hall, having never noticed me, and then disappeared into the shadows. Of course, I was astonished. Was my friend hopelessly insane? Or had I seen a ghost? I walked into the hall and watched as she entered another door down the corridor and closed it behind her. When I turned back to Roderick, he had buried his face in his hands, crying into his emaciated fingers.
Did you see her?
Well, yes, but I thought...
Well, the doctors say it is some sort of catalepsy. It developed a year ago. She had been doing well, battling it. Then it began to eat away at her body and soul, her brain and her heart, killing her spirit. She's in another world now. Might as well be dead. I never know when it will finally happen. Perhaps that was the last we'll ever see of her.
For several days after that, Usher never mentioned her name. Meanwhile, I tried to raise his spirit. We painted and read together. He played guitar, we sang. But the oppressive gloom never raised itself from his soul. My attempt had been a futile effort. Life was light, and he lived in darkness. I don't know how many hours I spent with him, this last master of the House of Usher. I began to think that many of his illnesses were the products of a hypochondriac. Whenever he'd complain about them, I changed the subject. Roderick, what's this picture here? A small painting presented the interior of an immensely long and rectangular vault or tunnel. The walls smooth, white, and the ceiling low. It appears to be a deep vault below the ground. There's no windows or torches, yet it appears to be bathed in light. How odd. Roderick did not answer. Instead, he played his guitar while I read one of his poems to myself, a dreary ode to his haunted homestead, but at the end of it he explained